I'm Mia Breitkoff, and this is my presentation on the future of gamification in libraries. This is a presentation for the course I'm taking, Meaningful Gamification, with Dr. Scott Nicholson. This is a course being taught at Syracuse University's School of Information Studies in fall 2012. This talk I'm going to give is part of my final project for that class. I'm going to talk a little bit about gamification and what it is. I'm going to talk about the intersection of both games and gamification and libraries. And I'm going to talk a little bit about something called meaningful gamification. Now that we've reached the final week of this course, Scott Nicholson has told us students that he sees us really at what he calls the bleeding edge of thought around gamification. We've been reading gamification books about gaming. We've talked about the different psychological aspects of gaming and gamification. So let's start here. What is gamification? Well, it's using game design elements in non-game settings. You've seen it before. If you're on Facebook, you have liked something most likely, and that's gamification. It's using things like points, levels, and badges in non-game settings. Nike Plus is an example of a gamification system. Gamification is being used in education, healthcare. It's even being used by companies like Starbucks. If you have a Starbucks rewards card, you're earning points toward rewards. That's gamification. So, going back even farther, we can talk about the history of libraries and gaming. In his book, Everyone Plays at the Library, Scott Nicholson discussed two ways in which libraries can actually be involved in gaming. One would be through collections, like actually having libraries collect games as they would books, and catalog them and make them maybe available for people to check out. There's another way to approach gaming in libraries, and that would be through services and programs. Nicholson even suggests some libraries could consider programming that supports community members making their own games. Libraries have, for a long time, supported the community's recreational needs. Everything from Harlequin novels and Western novels in our collections to DVDs and graphic novels have supported the community's recreational needs. And these days, video games and board games can be part of the media that libraries collect and make available for these purposes. Jenny Levine is someone who has written about the outcomes available to libraries who actually implement gaming programs. Some examples of possible outcomes for programs like these include increased connection of underserved audiences to library staff or increased civic engagement. Actually, a 2008 Pew Internet study found a direct correlation between some aspects of gameplay and positive civic outcomes, like following politics or convincing other people to vote or contributing to charities or even volunteering. So, libraries' involvement with games is really nothing earth-shattering. I mean, even the Library of Congress is collecting video games and preserving them. But there's a difference between libraries hosting games or lending game collections or holding game creation programming and gamification. Gamification of libraries entails applying a game-like overlay to the library use experience. Library Game is a gamification platform that's been recently created. It has versions for both public and academic libraries. It launched in April 2012. The University of Huddersfield in the UK was actually a trial library. It was an academic library. This gamification system allows library staff to do things like see real-time data on usage, and it allows library members to do things like rate, review, or recommend library services. It also rewards them with badges for using the library's resources. Library Game uses game elements like competition, leaderboards, and a progress bar. So why would libraries use gamification at all? Why do librarians even care about gamification? Well, for starters, there was a 2012 Horizon report that came out, that predicted game-based learning would significantly impact both teaching and learning at all levels. We're talking K through 12 and beyond. And this would happen within the next 2 to 3 years, the report purported. So it really predicted the widespread adoption of gamification in education. And libraries whose mission includes education and the support of education and educators can't really help but take note of this. Library game designers, the folks who actually designed library game, pointed out a correlation between better grades and higher library resource usage. So they actually say university students who use the library more are more successful. And their game system actually aims to reward library resource use. One of the pros of gamification is best portrayed through Jane McGonigal's argument she made in Reality is Broken. She wrote, quote, "Experiencing a short burst of community in a space that previously felt uninviting or simply uninteresting can permanently change our relationship to that space," unquote. So if a gamification platform can somehow engage library members in sharing a social experience, perhaps that could actually change the way that library members think about their library. This helps us see how providing gaming experiences within or associated with the library can actually change people's perception of the library and attitudes toward it. If gamification could engage library community members in playful interaction within the library context, within its services and its community, maybe people's perceptions and attitude toward the library would change. This could help the library's image problem. So Eli Nyberger actually talked about the library's current brand being books. When most people think about libraries, they think books. A 2008 OCLC study found American voters support funding for public libraries not because they use libraries for recreation, but because the libraries have a potential to help people achieve their own potential. A library gamification application that would allow people to achieve their potential could go a long way toward helping rebrand the library. Eli Nyberger suggests the brand of the library should be its transformative power, not books. But it's not all fun and games when it comes to gamification. There's actually potentially some danger in the application of gamification to libraries. And Professor Scott Nicholson actually points out a phrase he read in one of the leading gamification publications out there today. In the book Gamification by Design, authors Cunningham and Zickerman actually write something that Scott Nicholson finds quite alarming. Gamification uses rewards in a specific way. This is to lead the player through a determined set of actions, and when the rewards stop, the actions stop. So in a July 2012 blog post he called "The Risks of Rewards When BLAP Gamification is Problematic," Nicholson wrote that libraries need to understand this so that they're not, quote, signing up for life when they start using gamification. Because, as Zickerman and Cunningham point out, once you start giving someone a reward, you have to keep her in that reward loop forever. This leads me to talk about some of the cons of gamification. Margaret Robertson, in a blog post, called it pointsification. She doesn't like gamification. She says points and badges aren't important elements of games. They're just tools that are designed to show your progress along the way toward your goals. Points and badges aren't the goal itself of a game. She and some others are pointing out that achieving points for the point of achieving points is meaningless. So when points don't have a relationship to each other or don't have a relationship to a long-term goal, the user is actually trapped into earning points just for the sake of earning points. Is this the sort of behavior that we want to foster through libraries? Is this something libraries and librarians should be doing at all? Nicholson doesn't think so. He's come up with what he calls meaningful gamification to address this. In October 2012, Nicholson presented at the 2012 Meaningful Play Conference. Here's a quote from his publication from that presentation. Quote, "Rather than focus on external rewards in a scoring system, meaningful gamification focuses on play to engage participants." And he goes on to tell about engaging participants in a spontaneous, playful learning space. There's use for typical rewards-based gamification and its points, levels, badges. But Nicholson really thinks to change to change behavior in a long-term way, gamification really has to allow players to play. That is, play allows for authentic learning, the sort of learning that changes the way you look at the world and understand your place in it. So when a gamification system focuses on the players themselves and allows the players to be participants, active participants, when it allows them to, as Nicholson writes, quote, find meaning in a real-world activity, it allows players to feel real, intrinsic motivation. So if a library gamification system allows players to feel personally motivated to engage with libraries, that system would actually have a fighting chance to change the way players understand the library, maybe to change their attitude toward the library, and even better yet, to change the way they understand their relationship to the world around them. In order to offer what Nicholson calls meaningful gamification experiences, libraries must offer choice. Players need to be given the ability to decide how they will engage with the system. They need to feel like they're in a sort of DIY system, a system that offers them tools they can use to make their own game choices and design their own game. They need to be part of the design of the game. And they need to feel like they have the ability to connect with other players. They need to actually socially connect with other library community members, those who are playing in the gamification system. So for this final project for my meaningful gamification class, I actually have to try to predict the future of gamification in libraries. I do think that library pointsification could work short term. The company that created Library Game could get people to sign up for the system, and that could get people to visit the library more often or to check out more books in order to earn more points. But to succeed on a long-term basis and to remain true to what I think are the ethical responsibilities of librarianship, library gamification needs to do more. And that's where I think meaningful gamification comes in. In his book, Everyone Plays at the Library, Scott Nicholson details how libraries can implement gaming programs. So he's not talking about gamification here, but he's talking about gaming. And he brings up something I think is relevant to gamification in libraries. He stresses that library game programs must directly tie in meaningfully with the library's mission. So he says, if a game program in a library is to succeed, it needs to really be tied in closely to the library's mission, and clear goals for the library game program have to be set. I think if gamification in libraries is to succeed, it must do the same thing. So libraries considering implementing gamification have to do a few things. They have to stick to their mission. They have to identify clear goals that they want to achieve through gamification, and they need to make sure that the gamification itself is designed to achieve these goals. And they have to create a detailed plan for how the gamification will support these particular goals. And they finally need to identify outcomes they wish to see from the gamification. Very importantly, libraries need to assess the gamification implementation. They need to make sure that the gamification platform they're using matches the goals that they've set for themselves for this project, and they need to make sure that the outcomes match the goals. So what's the future of gamification in libraries? Well, libraries are slow to change. So even if gamification does become widespread in education over the next 2 or 3 years, as the Horizon report predicted, it's going to take much longer for libraries to actually engage with gamification. And I have concerns about privacy issues surrounding the sharing of library resource usage, like we're seeing in projects like Library Game. And I have concerns that library gamification implementers will mistake pointsification, or what Scott Nicholson calls BLAP, the use of badges, levels, achievements, and points, for the whole point of gamification. If libraries can really embrace the ideas of meaningful gamification and create player-centered, playful, choice-centric tools for engagement, then they might have a chance at creating meaningful gamification systems that'll really stick around. And these systems might actually do some real good. I think we're going to continue to see more library gamification systems introduced in the next few years, but I don't see libraries embracing them in a widespread way anytime real soon. I think librarians and library administrators are going to take a wait and see approach and see how the use of gamification in areas like education and healthcare make a difference. Only then will they maybe decide to allocate some of their very limited funds toward projects like this. In general, I think libraries should take more risks and act more quickly to roll out new programs and services, if at all possible, without debating and weighing every single point of every single issue that could go wrong. But I think when it comes to gamification, libraries should be more reserved and should hold back. Librarians have an ethical responsibility to make sure that library community members are taken care of when it comes to privacy. And we can't just jump on the gamification bandwagon unless we understand completely what gamification could really mean for our community.